Pauper format might actually fundamentally change forever with the new set. Spider-Man is just around the corner, and regardless of in-paper versus online, we have a whole new swath of legendaries coming to the format. Common legendaries. I never thought I'd see the day, and now with the Pauper format, they're going to enter it and provide an impact towards one of Pauper's best removal spells in Cast Down. Being able to destroy a non-legendary creature is essentially the best Doomblade variant the format can offer, except now with the Universes Beyond trend of adding more legendaries to help commander players can only serve to make this card worse, can only serve to change the status quo. And whether it's happening now or later, I figured now is a good time to have this discussion around one of Pauper's best removal spells. This is a post from our Pauper. This cycle of creatures from the new set is immune to Cast Down, which is very relevant. There's a bunch of them, and this is from the Spider-Man set. And as I mentioned in the intro, I think this is going to be a growing relevant discussion with the amount of cards in the set that serve as a balancing factor to being legendaries. You're not going to have multiple of them on the battlefield, but also to serve as a commander boost, to serve as slots inside of sets where people just want multiple versions of the same legendary to serve throughout different times. So for example, in Spider-Man, you're going to see multiple versions of said Spider-Man, not only because of their backgrounds, but because of the universes that they're in. And you're going to be seeing this in future Universes Beyond sets as well. As we saw in the Final Fantasy set and even the Lord of the Rings sets, there are multiple Gandalfs, there are multiple Clouds, and we do get to see certain characters shine, especially with Final Fantasy. There are just so many characters out there that you don't have the chance to have multiples in every single Universes Beyond set, but you can imagine with certain UB sets coming in the future that we will only see, again, this continuing and this repeating. There are more common versions of certain characters that you might see maybe in their lay form, but even now in these specific Spider-Man cards, these are pretty bombastic and super in their own way. The fact that they're common feels kind of out of place. The fact that you can be a common legendary doesn't really suit the role of these cards. But honestly, the only common legendary that first comes to mind is maybe something like Moomin Rider from the One Punch Man anime, but maybe that's more so for flavor purposes. But for now, Cast Down itself is black and 1 as an instant that says destroy target non-legendary creature. Again, as mentioned in the intro, being the best Doomblade variant in Pauper, it was originally printed in Dominaria, but then later in Double Masters printed as a common. Now this fundamentally changed the Pauper format because it became the best removal spell in black. Just stop all, right? We don't have Fatal Push in the format. We don't have things like that. Now we do have some free removal spells and things like that, but this is just a way to destroy a non-legendary creature, aka every creature in the format, big or small. It was a clean answer, albeit at 2 mana, but sometimes you can't complain about your Doomblade variants. There are, as mentioned, the free cards such as, just realized it's behind me because I was cleaning some stuff out, but you have your Snuff Out to the world. Now Snuff Out is 4 mana, but you can, if you control Swamp, destroy a non-black creature. So even at free, that card has a restriction. Now that card is not as common in the Pauper format right now. You're still having to see Cast Down. And so when you have this clean removal spell, the status quo will eventually change. Magic goes through phases. If something wasn't done before, we will see it likely be done in some iteration in the future. There has to be innovation. You can't constantly keep printing the same cards over and over again, but there is a line to be met when it comes to the discussion of power creep. People always like to look back and say, oh my God, the times before and all this, Magic was so much better back then. And you really got to ask yourself, was it really? Right? Like there are so many great efficient cards right now, and arguably, when you look at formats like Modern or Legacy, they're really just Modern Horizon soup at this point. And that's when we're kind of used to it. It's just like Universes Beyond. Eventually, we will all get used to it at some point, no matter how much we hate it. You either leave the game or you stick around and you have to force yourself to enjoy it and just get with it. And that's going to happen with something like Cast Down, as I mentioned, as more common legendaries get printed, as more variations of these legendaries get printed for the sake of Commander in our constructed formats. Now, that's a whole separate problem in and of itself. That's not really within the scope of this video, although I might bring it up one more 2 times because it is a bit of a travesty. Now in Pauper, just going to show you, it is the 9th most played spell overall, just card overall in the Pauper format. 25% of decks running it at least as a 3 of, if not a 4. Cast Down, again, overall cards being played in a highly interactive format. You can see in a world dominated by right now blue and red, a singular black removal spell alongside maybe a duress, Pauper's Thoughtseize effect. You can start to see how certain effects are really good for the Pauper format in terms of interaction and best in class of said interaction. As I mentioned, no Thoughtseize in the format. Duress is your closest analog as a catch-all to not necessarily get the threats, but get the interaction that might stop you from removing said threats. But what we had before the Spider-Man set, and Spider-Man's not even legal as of the kind of making of this video, and I honestly, as of the publishing of this video, probably won't be legal technically either, but you used to have, if you do a Scryfall search, all of these cards. You had right now 13 cards be legal in the Pauper format that are both legendary and a creature. All of them are common legendaries in some way, in the sense of they don't have any real effects to them, whereas you'll notice the Spider-Man ones, which we'll go over, do. So I mean, Chandler and Joven were kind of exceptions for a very long time, and yeah, honestly there is relevancy to Chandler. Destroy target artifact creature affinity has been popular for a while, and then destroy target non-creature artifact is also relatively important as well, so there's relevancy there. But you know, the Barktooth Warbeard and the Jedit and all that stuff, yes, these are common, but you know, just being playable in Pauper is a whole different discussion. In Modern Horizons, though, I remember doing a brief video on this, but Skoa Ember Mage was actually the first modern era common legendary printed. A 6 mana for a 4/4. When it enters, you deal 4 damage to any target, and then you may discard another card named Skoa and then sacrifice 2 mountains. Skoa deals 4 damage to any target. So you're doing like a bad Fire Blast impression, whereas Fire Blast is 6 mana and it deals 4 damage, but you can sacrifice 2 mountains and deal 4 damage. Again, doing that soft rendition of that. Skoa requires you to actually have a Skoa out. So in a format that doesn't really cheat things in as much like that, like you don't have sneak attack in the format, you're not really using anything like this. But as mentioned, the Spider-Man set changes this. So now, as we saw from the previous list, we have a total of 10 cards being common legendaries from the Spider-Man set entering the Pauper format. Now, the discussions to be had are not only about playability, but where, the type of synergies that they have, whether it's on the battlefield, in hand, in the graveyard. All of these discussions are important. And so we're going to go through these card by card to really see if Cast Down is really seeing a sink now, or if this is going to be a long-term pattern that we're going to see. And right now, maybe we can still continue to play Cast Down in this sense. So firstly, the cards that I notably want to mention are going to be the cheaper cards, the ones that maybe have relevancy in the graveyard or in hand in some way, or have like a great ETB effect. So firstly, Beetle Legacy Criminal, 4 mana for a 3/3 with flying, not that great, but in the graveyard, it says blue and 1, exile this card from your graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on target creature, it gains flying until the end of turn and activate only as a sorcery. So if there is a world where you can make something obscenely large, it has haste, or maybe you've already untapped with it, exiling Beetle through maybe putting it in your graveyard after a Faithless looting or something like that could be a very powerful way to give something evasion, make it slightly bigger, and that's where something like Beetle is really going to shine. Obviously, something like Doc Ock isn't going to be that relevant. It's a 5 mana 4/5 that could be an 8/8. A 5 mana 8/8 could mean something, but again, there's no reduction to it. Even in Pauper right now, where we have 6 mana 5/5s and 7 mana 5/5s or whatever, you are able to cast those for 1 mana, if not 2. Right? You're thinking Cryptic Serpents and Gurmag Anglers. You don't want to be paying rates for things like this. Now, another card, if I can hide my camera, is going to be, oh, not that one, is going to be Spider-Man Brooklyn Visionary. Now, web slinging is really interesting as a reduction. This says whenever Spider-Man enters, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. You can pay that for 5 for a 4/3, but if you web sling this, you may cast this for 3, green and 2, and return a tap creature you control to its owner's hand, and have this enter as a 4/3, tutor for a basic, you're at 4 mana, next turn you play a land, you're at 5 mana all of a sudden. But then you return the tap creature to your hand. So on turn 1, what you can do is go forest some type of elf that gives you mana, whether that be, one that gives you straight green or untaps. You can pay that on 1. Then on 2, you can pay 3 mana. The elf is tapped to give you mana. Then web sling in a Spider-Man to then play a 4/3 on turn 2, get a land, and then you untap with more mana on your turn. It's not bad. It's some type of rate, but it's an introductory way to where web sling can become relevant. Is Spider-Man Brooklyn Visionary going to be the most played card? Probably not, but it's a line that is possible. It's something that you're going to see potentially in the Brewers circle of things. Now, when it comes to, I'm going to mention some of these cards at the end here, but Stegron, the Dinosaur Man here, it has Menace. It's a 5 mana 5/4, but in your hand, it says pay 2 mana, red and 1, discard this card. Until the end of turn, target creature you control becomes +3/+1. It becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other types. Now, this is a combat trick that you can use in hand. You can use this, you can do this at any point. If you have any synergies that kind of work with you discarding cards, that's great. You can, as mentioned, do this as in speed to give something +3/+1. It becomes a dinosaur, but there's no other evasion. You're not giving it vigilance, you're not giving it trample, menace, whatever. That would probably make it a little too powerful and probably a little bit too good to be a common, and honestly might be one of the better cards in limited. So you have to be careful with what you're giving it. So Stegron has viability in the hand. If you have a deck that cares for critical mass of creatures, this could be a great way to get a combat trick in while having creatures in your hand. The last card that I want to mention that probably doesn't meet the bar of viability is Venom Evil Unleashed. 5 mana for a 4/5 with Death Touch. It says in your graveyard, you may pay black and 2 to exile this creature card from your graveyard, put 2/1/1 counters on target creature against Death Touch until end of turn. At first thought, I was kind of trying to see if we could brew with this with Karkland Shaman, where you deal like 1 damage to everything and you could wipe the board and it still stays alive. But the thing is that because it gains Death Touch, it's just going to wipe itself out anyway, because it's dealing damage to itself with Death Touch. So that doesn't really work. I was thinking of it in Affinity if you played like Faithless Looting versions. Again, it's so close, like it buffs something. The problem is that it's limited by the fact that it's only sorcery speed. So it's not even like you could use this as a combat trick in the graveyard to give something like, make something bigger and just have it be a better chump blocker with Death Touch. It could be a soft unblockable with Death Touch, you know, like maybe there's a world. It's just not even a great reanimate target either, because even when you reanimate it as a 4/5, it's not like it has great evasion either. Again, Death Touch isn't really evasion. It just makes it harder to block. You can still block it if your opponent wants to live. So it's so close, just not that far. But the 2 cards that I mentioned that do have viability here are Swarm Being of Bees. First one, black and 2 for a 2/2. Not that this is going to be a staple, but I think there's something for this where it has Mayhem, it has Flash and Flying. You may cast this card from your graveyard for black if you discarded it this turn. Timing rules still apply. Now, what I like about this card is because, you know, yeah, you can Faithless Looting this on your turn, and at any point on your turn, you can cast it because it has Flash. You don't have to just be casting it on your main phase or your second main. Also, because it has Flash, if you were able to discard it at instant speed, you could have it enter as a untapped 2/2 with Flying, and maybe at end step or something. If you were able to somehow discard this at instant speed, then that's going to be a great way to get something like that going. Some type of instant speed, draw, discard, or whatever it is. Swarm Being of Bees could actually be a really cool recursive threat of cards coming out of your graveyard. Now, is this going to be the most relevant thing? No, because of the fact that it's legendary. That's where it becomes balanced. That's where I'm kind of drawing that line. You're not going to have 4 of these out on the battlefield. You can only really have 1. Is there some type of sack engine where you can make this going? Maybe, but the problem is this card for its mayhem cost, you know, cares if you discarded it this turn. So even if you sacrifice it, you can actually cast this from your graveyard for 1 black if you discarded it this turn to some type of like some sack outlet if you have the mana. So there is that. That is like the last piece of viability where you can flash this in, sacrifice it if you have another black, keep going over and over again to some type of sack outlet and get value there. But you're really probably only playing it as a 1 to 2 of, because again, it's a legendary. You can't have multiples out, but there is value to it. So I think Swarm Being of Bees is close. And it's even in like Tortured Existence lists, this is a pretty cool Tortex card, because then you could discard it, get a creature back, and then like play it. Problem with Tortex lists is like the decks don't work without Tortured Existence, so we kind of need a second copy of Tortured Existence somewhere. But regardless, at common, Swarm Being Bees could be good. The last one is actually Spider-Man Webslinger, which a lot of people are talking about in terms of being in the blue-red, or not blue-red, the white-red, white X shells. that look to bounce artifacts, core Skyfisher, Glint Hawk, all that stuff, bounce artifacts and play a mid-range control game, and the Boros mid-range list overall. Spider-Man Webslinger is white and 2 for a 3/3, no evasion, no other tricks, but it has webslinging for 1. So you may cast this spell for its for 1 white if you also return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. So after you go to combat, after you maybe convoke something out, you can websling this in for 1 to return a card with an ETB, return a card with an ETB that you maybe convoked or whatever it is. It could be in addition to something like a Glint Hawk, a core Skyfisher. Yes, those cards are generally speaking better. This could be analogs to that because a 1-mana 3/3 is powerful. It doesn't just return other effects for, you know, just like it doesn't just return other artifacts like Glint Hawk. This also returns other creatures, whereas the core Skyfisher returns it for 2. This returns it for 1, but requires that thing to be tapped. So there's pluses and minuses everywhere. Spider-Man Webslinger is viable alongside Swarm being a bees, albeit limited. Again, being legendaries really limits you from having it be like multiple playsets, which is ultimately where I land on the whole cast down debate. I don't believe cast down is going anywhere. I think cast down is perfectly fine. The fact that these cards are legendaries, as I mentioned multiple times, limits them to being played in multiples on the battlefield. If there ultimately is a legendary that is really powerful on the battlefield, has some crazy evasion, is like a 5/5 for 1, like a Gurmag Angler, then I can start to see cast down maybe start taking some points down, because then these threats are really hard to deal with other traditional removal spells. You know, if you had this is not going to happen, but I hope it doesn't. But if you have a legendary Gurmag Angler, you don't understand how powerful that is. That is, you can't kill that with Lightning Bolt, Galvanic Blast. You're going to need 2 sources of red removal to even deal with that. It's not being dealt with cast down. Something like Defile, which is -1/-1 for each swamp you control, that's not until turn 5. Like, you have to be really careful with the stat lines of legendary creatures that you're introducing, especially if they're not being able to be dealt with generally with the removal that is already peak in the format. I think cast down is RG fine. We're not getting too many playables out of this set, but it doesn't mean we don't watch it in the future. I think we ultimately will get something that does break this and maybe starts to shift cast down, which, you know, in some people's eyes might be good or bad, but we don't have a problem for now. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you feel like I'm off basis? Do you feel like I'm missing something in the cards I'm talking about? Or am I just completely wrong about any of these legendaries? We're not seeing them anywhere. Spider-Man is a dud set for Pauper in general. Sound off in the comments.